3:30 on a Friday, so I hope you're still with us here. We hope to make this interesting for you. Make sure you remain engaged leading into the weekend. I know you probably all have exciting plans on a Friday night, so we'll try to keep this nice and tight. So my name is Pat Dalzell. I'm going to be moderating this panel today. We're very excited to talk a little bit about the role the nuclear industry plays in isotope production. So joining me on stage today, we have right to my left here, Patrick Reed from AtkinsRealis, followed by Rachel Pickering from BWXT Medical, and Laura Van Sillen, who's with Laurentis Energy Partners. And so, I mean, the past couple of days, you've been hearing a lot about advances in the uses of isotopes, and I was just listening to some of the presentations, and they were very exciting, interesting, and I'm by no means an isotope expert, but I have worked for Bruce Power for the past 13 years, and I like to think that I know a little bit about nuclear power. And that's what we're hoping to tell you all a little bit today, the role that nuclear power is playing in the medical community. You know, not everybody knows that nuclear power powers about two-thirds of Ontario's electricity. Right? All emissions free, obviously it's gaining traction because of environmental concerns, protecting the environment, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We're very proud of the role we play there. And a number of years ago, we started producing medical isotopes. Well, cobalt-60 was the first isotope we were producing. That was sort of part of our regular processes. We produced energy, some of the components that we use to balance out reactivity in our core, specifically adjuster rods, could be harvested and used for medical purposes. And as we expanded that role and we started using cobalt-60, high specific activity cobalt-60 to treat brain tumors, we started asking ourselves the question, well, are there other isotopes we can produce? And I'll never forget the day where my boss just called me into his office and said, you know, we've had a lot of success producing cobalt-60. Maybe we should look at other isotopes. You should look into whether or not we can produce moly. I had no idea what he was talking about, so like a good employee, I ran over to my computer and I Googled, how do you make moly? And I came up with something completely different. Trust me, you probably don't want to look that up. You might get in trouble with HR. But all that to say, it did set us down a path that we're very excited about. We're very proud of the role we now play in isotope production. And just to sort of get us kicked off here, you know, Laura, maybe you can kind of describe a little bit the role that power reactors can play in terms of medical isotope production.
Super. Well, we are very lucky here in Canada. We have a wide array of isotope production technologies. We have research reactors, we have cyclotrons, we have particle accelerators, and more recently, power reactors have joined the game, I guess I would say, in producing short-lived radioisotopes. At OPG's Darlington facility, for example, we are producing moly-99, not the kind of moly that you may have gotten a Google hit on, but the moly that decays to technetium-99 that's used in over 40 million medical diagnostic procedures around the world annually. At Bruce Power, you have been able to retrofit your reactors to have a system that produces lutetium-177. The very neat thing about the CANDU nuclear technology that we have here in Canada is that radioisotopes can be produced while we're producing power. We don't have to take outages. This all happens seamlessly in the background, the irradiation, the exposure to neutrons, and the harvesting. So very exciting development.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. It is very exciting and really something that Ontario seems to be taking a lead on right now. And of course, one of the things that we know about Ontario nuclear is that it uses CANDU technology. CANDU technology that AtkinsRealis currently basically manages the licenses for, right? Can you talk a little bit about, you know, what's involved in turning a CANDU power reactor into an isotope making machine?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, AtkinsRealis is, I guess the right word is the steward of CANDU technology. It's a reactor design that was originally developed by the Government of Canada, but AtkinsRealis is now the entity that maintains the design. So we're sort of the OEM for CANDU design. The thing that made it possible for Ontario to take the step with power reactors is something that goes right back to the roots of how CANDUs were designed. When CANDU was being developed in Canada, we wanted a nuclear power capability that didn't require enriched uranium, and also that we could build in country as much as possible, that was within the manufacturing technology available to Canada in the 1950s. And so unlike most reactors in the world, we don't have to have this ginormous pressure vessel tank that holds pressure at 150 atmospheres or whatever at hundreds of degrees Celsius. Our big tank is just a tank full of warm water, not at pressure. So because of that, any nuclear reactor's got a lot of neutrons flying around inside of it, but a CANDU nuclear reactor is set up so that it's not, you don't have to figure out how to unscrew something that's at 150 atmospheres and hundreds of degrees. You can get in and out during operation in a very straightforward way. So it was sort of a free gift purchase, if you want to say, for CANDU technology. And as you mentioned, the first things we started doing in CANDU reactors was using mechanisms that were already there, and we just put cobalt in instead, and we made cobalt-60. But because of that big tank, it is possible to use locations on the sides of the tank to add something where you can insert something into the reactor, let it irradiate, pull it out. You don't have to turn the reactor on and off. The whole reactor is designed so that largely inside the building is accessible to people. Workers can go in and do maintenance and things like that in CANDU reactors during operation all the time. And so we leverage these things that we had already built into the design to make it so that you can, what do you need to make isotopes? You need neutrons. You need to be able to move things in and out quickly because they decay away, right? And that means access in and out of the neutrons and access to and from the larger area. And all of that we already had in CANDU reactors. So it meant, not to say that there wasn't work to do to adapt the existing reactors to be able to make isotopes, but it was much more straightforward in a CANDU than in any other kind of reactor design. And we have, I always do it wrong when I try to do the math in my head, but 18 operating reactors in the province, whichever number it is, and all of them are adaptable in this way. So that's right. That's what you need to do, and that's why it's it was part of the reason why it happened in Ontario. Aside from the fact that we have in Canada a history of leadership in isotopes, was the fact that that capability was uniquely present for us in a way that it isn't in a lot of other jurisdictions.
Yeah, no, thanks for that explanation. Very helpful. So I guess the next kind of question I have, we've heard from sort of two of the operators, the people who make the isotopes, the folks who build the technology that creates the neutron fields that allow these things to be irradiated. Rachel, BWXT, I'm familiar with BWXT. They're working very hard, based out of Cambridge, on producing our steam generators. So these massive components that the biggest crane in the world uses as we refurbish our reactors. It's an amazing story for investment in Ontario. It really talks about the importance of supporting a nuclear supply chain that creates good jobs and supports advanced manufacturing. I'm not as familiar with the role of BWXT at the medical level, and so what you're doing and how it contributes to the full value chain of isotope production in Ontario. Would you mind describing that a little bit, what BWXT does there?
Absolutely. So at BWXT Medical, we use the targets that are irradiated at OPG through our partnership with Laurentis to manufacture radiopharmaceutical ingredients and finished products for diagnostic and therapeutic applications. So whether our customers are other companies who are using our ingredients to manufacture finished products, or whether our customers are hospitals, they all want the same thing. They want to make sure that they're getting their product on time, when they expected, without interruption. So on-time delivery is critical every single time. So when we think about supply chain and how we can make sure that patients have access to the critical products that they need, we have to make sure that we're looking at all areas of the supply chain and de-risking that. So adding redundancy of supply, adding in diversification of supply, sometimes developing very special relationships that will enable us to get the focus and the attention we need during times when unexpected things are happening in the world. So I think of supply interruptions that happened, for example, during COVID. So not only do we need our starting materials, being our targets from the reactor, we also need all kinds of other ingredients that go into making our finished products. And any kind of interruption anywhere along the way impacts patient access to these critical materials. When I think about supply chain, because that was one of the things we thought we'd touch on in this panel, I think about everything from start to finish for what it takes to make that finished product that patients are relying on. The targets, the starting materials that we need to actually make those finished products, being vials, septa, seals, any kind of reagents. Our people, we've heard a lot of people talking about talent and how important it is to have the right people available to make these products for us and our workforce. Also distribution. How are we making sure that the products we've put all this energy into making are getting to hospitals and our customers on time? We rely on distribution partners to be able to accomplish that, and oftentimes we find that we need to spend extra time developing relationships with those distribution partners to explain to them why our finished product packages are very different than something from Amazon, right? So if you see our yellow box at the airport, make sure you prioritize our box to get to that hospital site because a patient's waiting for it. So we've spent a lot of energy with our distribution partners helping to educate them and train them on why it's important for their staff to recognize our important medical products. So I think redundancy and reliability of supply, these are all important aspects to consider, but then the relationship building part is really important too with your partners and your strategic service providers.
And your point's well taken. If you're a cancer patient, right, having a delay it's devastating, potentially devastating. And so it's a different priority of Amazon, like everybody likes to get their package on time. This is a completely different thing. So obviously very important to make sure that you've got that full value chain. Ideally, we put it together right here in Canada, right? That's I think one of the key issues that the Canadian Nuclear Isotope Council focuses on, right? Making sure that policymakers, that there's an awareness of the important role that isotopes can play in the global healthcare system. And certainly getting all the pieces together and working together is a key function of the Canadian Nuclear Isotope Council, which is part of the reason we're all here today. Just on the, when I think of the CNIC, I think of the advocacy piece and the role that they play in terms of advocating for support for this important industry. Laura, from your perspective, what is what differentiates isotopes from other drug manufacturing, and what specific policy support do you feel the isotope industry needs to make a go of it here in Canada?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Pat. I'm going to maybe take that from the perspective of access. We've talked a lot at this conference, I think rightly and excitingly for me, on access for Canadian patients to what it is that we're producing here in Ontario. And we are blessed. If you look at the CNIC membership, you will see that we have all aspects of the radiopharmaceutical supply chain covered. We have the sources of neutrons in our power reactors. We have the sources of protons in our cyclotrons and in our accelerators. We've got processors like BWXT and others, Nordion, who are able to take what's irradiated to start purifying that and to get that ready so that it's medical grade. We've got distribution and logistic companies. So we've got everything we need to get product to Canadians. And by product, I'm talking about radio pharmaceuticals to Canadians. Where I think there's work to do, and work to do for all of us on stage, it's really to educate some of the decisions that are being made then on the policy side about drug authorizations and about reimbursement and coverage. Because the reality is here in Canada, we are a very small market, and unless we can I think it's important that we simplify the process for bringing products to market here in Canada so that there's not a so that we reduce the barrier for some companies that are looking to develop their pharmaceuticals here. And that would allow these products that are made in Canada, processed in Canada, transported in Canada, to benefit more Canadians. So I think it's important that we look at the entirety of the value chain, and then look also at the clinical experience and the access for patients, and look at whether there are improvements that can be made to some of our processes, whether that's reducing timelines or looking at outcomes. And as I say, for us on stage, I think educating those who are making decisions about what's unique about this supply chain. So certainly in a traditional drug sense, you're not talking about having to bring a product into a nuclear reactor. And by the way, you can't just walk a product into a nuclear reactor and say, hey, can you insert this into the nuclear reactor core and then give it to me about a week later? That would be great. It doesn't work that way. It's a very complicated process. Everything has got to be very secured, obviously, and very well studied in advance. So certainly a very complex process and one that's unique in the radiopharmaceutical context.
I was just going to add, I think that's all very true in the integrated nature, but one of the other things that I think has come out in this conference is the fact that I don't think that there's a top in the market for radioisotopes. You know, the kind of innovation that we can see happening and continuing throughout the sector shows that the question over time is not going to be is going to be about whether we can generate all of the isotopes that we could imagine using to help people live longer and better lives. So I also think another thing that needs to happen is, you know, that all has to be in an environment where we understand that growth potential and the huge benefits. You know, speaking as someone who's, you know, looking from AtkinsRealis, we have a nuclear business, we design nuclear reactors. We also are a much larger engineering company that wants to play in all the different spaces. But, you know, in nuclear particularly, we're trying to advocate for something that will, we think, bring a great social good in terms of helping to support carbon-free energy and minimizing the effects of global warming. But now we have a whole other dimension that we can show that investing in this whole industry, investing in its growth, right, and developing designs like, you know, I work on the Can-Do Monarch design, and one of our overarching goals is to make it more straightforward to have you come in and ask us to irradiate something and give it back in a week. Now it's never going to be like that, but to give us more capabilities, more places in the reactor you can do it, make it easier to get people in and out without compromising the other critical infrastructure thing that these things do, which is generate electricity, and to do both of those in a seamless way. But the whole idea that, you know, it's not, you know, we already know that we've got to build a lot of electricity in this province right here and around the world to make more carbon-free energy. But we also need to build more capability to make more isotopes in more ways. And both of those things we can do in an integrated way.
I guess I'd just add one thing to that, to say that once we have those isotopes that we need to process them, and we need to turn them into products that can be used by patients. And, you know, just thinking of the investment we've made with the Moly-99 product, you know, BWXT has spent hundreds of millions of dollars on that. And so to bring many products like that is really a huge undertaking. So we would need to make sure that there's funding opportunities available to entice companies to invest this amount of money and then wait the amount of time they need to wait to be able to get you know, a return on that investment. So I think investment is critical, and we need to think about that really at all aspects around getting product to patients.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of build on the question I was asking Laura, and I see Pam DeMoff here in the crowd, who's been one of our, you know, strongest supporters at the federal government level. She helped secure an investment for our First Nations communities in our isotope production system. It was a great partnership that continues to build today, where we're working closely with the First Nations communities in the production of this cancer-fighting isotope. Great story for us, great story for our partners in the SON, and something that the federal government was instrumental in bringing together. And thank you, Pam, for all your help with that. So when both of you talk about these priorities, technology, supply chain, what would your asks of government be? How could government policy be shaped to help support those priorities?
Laura, we can start with you.
I think I just spoke about it, right? And I think part of what we're doing today, I think is integral to that. And as I look around the room, what we're doing today is we're having an incredible collaboration between the medicine and the nuclear industries, and I think we need to continue that, and government needs to continue that. We were very pleased as a company when we announced our partnership with Boston Scientific to begin producing yttrium-90 in 2026 at Darlington, that we had both the Provincial Minister of Energy and the Provincial Minister of Health there. It's almost a shame that we commented on that afterwards, that was such a unique thing to have happen. So I think part of what we need to do is continue to break down silos, continue to work closer together, because it will lead to better outcomes.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, that this is a story of coordination, right? And we have, I think, excellent regulators that really have a strong track record, and this is true in the area that I know most about, which is about nuclear power and nuclear safety in general. We've got a nuclear regulator in Canada that is well respected around the world and has experience of many decades in supporting the production of radioisotopes at nuclear facilities. And the thing that's very important, though, is to coordinate those activities along with all of the other regulation. There's a whole other, a chunk of in Canada, it's a complicated provincial federal structure. There's Health Canada, there's provincial authorities as well, and having all of these things work smoothly together, when you think about everything you said about the time-sensitive nature of everything that's being done when you're in production, that also supports the time-sensitive nature of being permitted to do all of those activities. And you also talked about the timeline and return on investment. The longer and the more uncertain those timelines are, the tougher it is to build this entirety that can save lives. So that would be something I think that there's the willingness for, but it's the kind of thing like you can never be too rich or too pretty. You can never have too effective an amount of collaboration from our regulatory partners in trying to achieve this.
And I guess the only thing I'd add to that would be to say that the process by which companies get access to this funding has to also be swift. And it has to be reasonable. So I think there's work to do there to facilitate more ready access, and that would ultimately help as well.
Agreed, that makes sense. I just want to, I look back to, how we got into producing isotopes, and, it came down to the NRU closing, and honestly, when I was asked about, whether we should make moly or not, the first time I'd ever heard of isotopes was back in maybe 2008, I think it was, when the NRU actually went down for a few months, became an international story. The supply of moly had really disappeared for a period of time. It caused a bit of a black eye on Canada in that way, and the government certainly had their challenges in trying to deal with it. I remember reading a paper that came out that looked at different options for producing moly-99, and one of them that was examined was power reactors. Could power reactors make moly-99? And the answer was a clear no. They would never do it. It doesn't make economic sense. There's no value. It's not worth the risk. I'm going to start maybe with you, Patrick, and maybe you can kind of describe, why would we use power reactors? I mean, in Ontario, again, 2/3 of Ontario's electricity, why do we bother? Why would we bother retrofitting these reactors to do this? Why not just make more research reactors? Why aren't research reactors carrying the load on this? Why are we doing this, Patrick?
Well, I think I'll do an anecdote. I remember even before then, a person I used to work with who was not a fan of making, who maybe was a co-author on the paper, I don't know, used to say that making medical isotopes in a power reactor was like using a 747 as a tanning bed. But, that was a superficial evaluation that I don't think, gave proper weight to what are all of the real benefits of this, right? Someone who's got their blinkers on and saying, my job is to make electricity, and that's the only way I make people's lives better, isn't taking advantage of the opportunity that exists. And, I'll say it again, especially with CANDU reactors, more thought, more observation. Obviously, you can make moly in a power reactor, because now it's happening, right? So that just wasn't right. And you can make it easier to make moly in power reactors, and that's one of the things that I'm trying to make happen every day right now, so that we can build more of these reactors and make more of everything, and not just moly. Like once you have the neutrons, you can make a cornucopia of different isotopes over time, as soon as you guys tell us what we need. But so why bother to do it? Because it is a good, right? And I think that it's important for people to, understand. You make a research reactor is also a very massive investment. And when you make an investment like that, you need to know you're going to really bring benefits to society. And I know money is the universal measure of value, supposedly, but it's not really, right? And the value, it's hard to put a value on the way, cancer therapies and diagnosis can affect people's lives. And so to me, that's why it's worth it. That's why we need to do it. That's why we need to capitalize on this opportunity we have here to mesh these things together, the various technological and other advances that we have that enable us to make everything better, all at once. To me, that's what it's about.
So maybe I would just add to that to say that I think we have to think out of the box, So by engaging in this partnership that we actually have addressed a number of supply challenges that are associated with the production of moly, if we want to continue with using that as an example. Historical supply chain was very complex. There was lots of areas where there was risk of interruption for supply and ultimately risk to patients, right? Not getting their products on time. And we saw that happening when there were shortages. So, by engaging in the partnership that we have, OPG is 4 hours away. So once they've irradiated the target, they can ship it to us in Ottawa. We're not far away. We then manufacture the bulk drug substance, and then we take that and we make generators out of it, and we're able to ship that to customers around the world. So, our goal will be to start with the US. So really, we've addressed a lot of the complexities around some of the supply chain issues that were leading to interruptions and ultimately having patient impact. So we can't just think about one piece of the puzzle. There could be benefits in other areas that warrant investigating, doing things a different way than you've done it before.
Yeah, that's great. And especially as here as we continue to successfully build that chain of delivery and production, right? We can, success can beget success, I think. And, we can continue to look forward to, making this a really long pole thing. Recently there was some announcement where there's a goal to grow the radiopharmaceutical industry in the province to employ I think the number was 85,000 people or something like that. And that would make it something that would be on par with the whole nuclear industry the way it is right now. And we can grow that too. So the last thing everybody here can do is you can go to www.canadiansforcandu and click yes, more CANDU, so you can have your isotopes. Please do it. Thank you.
And I would assume, I've already clicked yes, so you don't have to say yeah. I would assume too, a power reactor is much larger, there's more power than let's say a research reactor. Laura, is there an opportunity to scale? And is that scale required globally? What's your sense of that from the Laurentis perspective?
There is an incredible opportunity to scale. One of the features of most of our nuclear power plants here in Canada is that they have multiple units. So one way of scaling is across multiple units. The system that we co-developed with BWXT has multiple elevators. So you can scale through the addition of elevators, which are used then to descend targets into reactor cores. So multiple ways to scale from that perspective. And if I were to take your question about why, I'd maybe flip it around and say, now that through some really innovative partnerships that Bruce Power had and that we had together with BWXT, we've proven the concept that you can make these things at power reactors. the question of why, I think the answer is need. One of the things that I've been impressed with here today is we're no longer talking about radiopharmaceuticals just for oncology treatment. We're looking at how we can use this in other areas. And with the aging population, incredible need. So I think the question really now is why not?
That is the question. And I'm going to get in trouble for this, but speed round. What are you all most excited about going forward in terms of isotope production from the nuclear industry in Ontario? Patrick?
Oh, sure, great. More. So we make it a real speed run. Just more. More of everything.
Rachel?
Faster.
And I'm going to say opportunity. I've got kids. I think this is a fantastic opportunity for them to have interesting, enriching careers and make the world a better place.
Perfect answer. Thank you all very much for participating in the panel today. Thank you all for listening. We really appreciate it. And thank our panelists.